Okay. Good evening, everybody. Let's get something else on the screen. Oops. Helps if I click share. Actually, I'm not going to share a screen just yet. We are in the middle of chapter 4, Parak Dalid, Parak Araba. And what we were talking about last week at length had to do with the connection between addictions and the psukim that describe a person's descent into getting used to doing averot, doing sins, and acting the wrong way, and followed a very specific pattern. Where I left off was that there's a Gemara in Masachet Sukkah that gives a very nice, in quotes, a very nice description or parable of how that occurs. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at the positive side of climbing out of a life where you're not doing the right thing. And then we're going to move on to another pasuk elsewhere in Mishle to make another connection. And then we're going to move forward in the psukim. So let me first pop that Gemara in front of us. Here we go. Okay. Gemara in Sukkah describes, I'm not going to read, I'm going to read it, but I'll explain everything because it quotes a pasuk from Sefer Shmuel, which I don't need to get into right now. It describes the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, the following way. Amar Rava. Rava said, Batchila, at first, kira'o helech. First, the Yetzer Hara was referred to as someone who's walking, someone who's traveling. Levasov karao oreach. Then it referred to him as a guest. Levasov karao ish. And then it referred to the Yetzer Hara as a man. What does this mean? So if you look at the yellow down here, in other words, the evil inclination that began as a traveler gradually rose in prominence. Okay, what does that mean? Again, without going into the pasuk, which is Natan Navi said to or described to David HaMelech. If you know the story, that's great. If not, it's not important at the moment. But it's a description or mashal of what is the Yetzer Hara like. So it starts off, the Yetzer Hara kind of passing through. And then you invite him in as your guest into your home. And before you know it, he's an occupant in your home and becomes part of your life. That's the general description used by the Gemara to explain how is the Yetzer Hara appear over time in our lives. Behavior, in a sense, moves from something I do to something of who I am. It moves from external to internal in this whole gradual movement that we talked about last week. I want to talk a little bit about this idea on the flip side, the reverse. Rabbi Sol Salanter, who was the founder of what became known as the Musar movement, emphasized that spiritual decline, putting aside for a moment the idea of the Yetzer Hara getting its tentacles into you, but a person's spiritual decline, let's say they're really good at davening or they're really good at a certain mitzvah, and over time it wanes and it's not the same thing. It doesn't happen through just a dramatic theological rejection. Oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. It usually comes, as we talked about last week also, it comes through some small neglect. It's not so important for me to do this, or I'll do this, but I'm not going to do it the same way. It can be a relaxation vigilance. It can be a compromise of doing something you just didn't really necessarily feel that you could do, but now you're going to move into that. But over time, the neshama of the person starts to adjust downward and to shoot for a much lower bar. The sense what the person's doing is they're setting the bar for themselves lower and lower each time. And again, to remind you, we're talking about a series of psukim that deal exactly with these various verbs that talk about what happens when a person allows themselves to be caught in the snare of the Yetzer Hara. But just as addiction can escalate incrementally, just like going down the rabbit hole with Avera, with sin, can also happen incrementally, Kedusha, the other side of that coin, the positive side, also can grow incrementally. We can also see that there's a concept of hope that's embedded right into this very same model. If descent can happen step by step, so does the ascent. So does the growth. The Rambam tells us in Hilchot Tshuva, the section that he discusses about doing tshuva, of repenting, says that a person is not defined by where they have fallen, but the direction that they're choosing now. A few years ago on Shabbat Shuvah, I don't remember which year I said this, and it was not an original idea. I even said that it was not my idea. I thought that was a brilliant thought. So imagine you get onto a train and it starts going for a little while, and you realize you're going the wrong direction. You meant to get on the other train, the other direction. So you have two choices. You can just turn your body around and face the other direction, or you got to get off the train, cross the other side of the tracks, get on that next train, and go back the other way. Unfortunately, many people feel that when they try to make changes in their lives, that all they need to do is just reverse, not to reverse course, just to reverse what they were doing. But it doesn't mean they're not taking any proactive action. And that's the important part here. The same gradual mechanism that allowed the Yetzer Hara to entrench or the addiction can build recovery as well. You restore a boundary. Let's say, for example, a person said that, you know what, I need my phone. I'm not talking about now an emergency situation, not under regular circumstances. The person says, you know what, I really need to be on my phone on Shabbat. I need to go and be able to message a couple people on Shabbat. And then after a while, it becomes I'm checking the sports. After a while, checking the news. And they slide backwards, and they've destroyed all these boundaries. They're still doing everything else properly, but Shabbat somehow they are. And I'm sure you've all heard of at some point or another over the last number of years this phenomenon called half Shabbat or half Shabbos, which is where a person is so hooked onto their phone that they can't get away from it for Shabbat. I have heard. I didn't just read stories. I actually know a couple of people this happened to. They had Shabbat guests. It happened to have been, in this case, two guys that were learning in yeshiva. Were staying somewhere, this family, for Shabbat. And they kept thinking that one of the guests had a very bad stomach problem because he kept running to the bathroom. He was away for quite a bit of time, and he'd come back till they found out later. And they had to discuss, they found out from however they found, make no difference. He kept going to the bathroom to go on his phone. He was embarrassed, of course, to do it publicly. But so you've destroyed boundaries. So the opposite is to slowly restore boundaries. It doesn't mean you're going to say, okay, I'm not going on my phone at all, which would be nice, but may not be practical. Say, okay, I'm only going to go on to text somebody, and that's it. I'm not going to check news. I'm not going to check sports, anything else. It's also not good, but it's going in the right direction. You're restoring a certain boundary to the point where maybe you're not going to go on the phone. You change a habit. A person may say, now, understand, the Shulchan Aruch says that a person should attempt to daven with a minyan. It is best to daven with a minyan because you can say Baruch Hu and Kedusha, and you can say Amen and Baruch Hu V'roch Shemo. It's obviously much better when you're with a minyan. But when a person is a minyan goer, and then they just get lazy and say, you know what, I'm not talking Corona, I'm not talking war, just stam circumstances, just decide to give it up. Is that a backward step? A little bit, because now they've reduced the amount of Kedusha they have in their lives as far as what they can say. And then after time, they may say, okay, you know what? I've had enough. I need to go back to shul. This is ridiculous. Or may they never go to shul except maybe on Shabbat. It's really ridiculous. I need to go. So if you say, I'm not going from the point of never going to, I'm going to go 3 times a day, you've already set yourself up for failure. But I've discussed with people over the years when they want to make a change and they want to add davening in a minyan, I say, go to Mincha or go to Mariv once a day. Go that once a day. You can build up. Mincha is 15, 20 minutes. Mariv is 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes maximum. And you build up to that. But again, you are honest with yourself, and it's an act of almost resistance. Say, okay, I'm going to go against my nature right now, what I've fallen into. So just like all these psukim we saw last week in Mishle, that enable a person by going and getting ensnared and kind of feeling comfortable with the next step. Same thing with addictions, which we talked about. The opposite works as well. Trying to put yourself in a position where you can grow incrementally. I've said many, many times, a person who approaches Yom Kippur with the idea that they're going to wake up the day after Yom Kippur, be super Jew and perfect, they've missed the boat. Because you're not going to be. That's not who we are. We can't be that way. 99.9% of people will not wake up the day after Yom Kippur and be perfect Jews. It just doesn't work that way. We try to be the best we can. You can't say, well, I can't be like so-and-so, so I'm not even going to bother trying. That's terrible. Or, hey, I'm better than so-and-so. Also terrible. You don't compare yourself to anybody except to yourself. And that's how you grow. You say, okay, being honest with yourself, how are you going to grow? I wrote down a sentence that I want to read to you that I think kind of encapsulates this whole idea before we now connect it to another pasuk in Mishle. I'll read it to you. The Yetzer Hara does not conquer by storming the city. It enters as a guest, becomes comfortable, adjusts the furniture, and eventually claims ownership. An addiction follows the same spiritual blueprint. But the neshama, the soul, can reclaim the house, one deliberate act at a time. And that's really a kind of summary of what we've been talking about last week in the latter half of the class and this week tonight so far. Now, if you know Mishle, you're somewhat familiar with some of the more commonly known psukim. There's a pasuk that's quoted quite often when you talk about self-improvement type of speeches. You'll hear it Rosh Hashanah time. You'll hear it sometimes in Shabbat Shuvah Drashot. There's another pasuk that I want to bring in here, and it's this. This is from Perek Kaf Dalet, chapter 24. And I'm going to read it to you. It's not here in English. I will translate it. I'm really only going to talk about the first half of the pasuk. It says, Ki Sheva Yipol Tzadik Vakam, because a tzaddik falls 7 times and then he gets up. So what does this mean? What's it trying to tell us? First of all, it's kind of puzzling. You would think that Shlomo HaMelech would describe the Rasha as someone who falls and falls and falls. He may get up, but he'll fall again and fall again. You also might think that a tzaddik doesn't fall. A tzaddik is described as the person, someone who falls. Why would you describe? Just he's righteous. He doesn't fall. The deeper message is the greatness of the tzaddik is not that he never falls or fails. There's no such thing. But he doesn't remain fallen. I really want to say I've fallen and I can't get up, but I'm not going to say that, if you know the reference. But the tzaddik, the righteous person, the expression, the bigger they are, the harder they fall, is very, very true. Very true. We've unfortunately seen some very serious consequences from some tzaddikim who appeared to have been tzaddikim who fell very far. In some cases, are no longer alive as a result. But the higher up on the ladder you are, the smaller the thing is that affects who you are. What does that mean? There's an expression that Hashem judges the tzaddik kechut ha'se'ara, like the hair's breadth. So what does that mean in practical terms? I've used the following mashal many times over the years. Let's say you have a Maserati. It's worth $150,000, even with an empty tank of gas. And another guy next to you has a Yugo, a nice Yugoslavian junk car that with a full tank of gas is worth about $85. And I walk up to each one of those cars and I take a key. It's called keying a car, if you haven't heard this. And I take my key and I scratch the side of both doors, one on the Yugo and the one on the Maserati. The Yugo might have actually improved in price. It may have gone up, but if anything, it went down maybe a penny. The Maserati, you probably just did about $25,000 of damage at the bare minimum. Why? It's the exact same depth. It's the same scratch, the same key, because the Maserati is more powerful, it's more expensive, has a greater presence, so to speak. When Moshe Rabbeinu did something that he shouldn't have done, the punishment, in quotes, that he would receive is very different than if you and I did that. So the higher up you are, the harder you fall. But what happens when a person falls? What happens when a person makes a mistake? And this is also very true. I'm not going to go into it. I could give another whole class on how this works with addictions as well, but I'm not going to. But this also works in the world of addictions, of when a person has been sober, let's say been off of drugs for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 2 days, 3 days, whatever the amount of sobriety is, that fall doesn't define who they are. If they shoot up or they take a drink or whatever it might be, that doesn't define their sobriety at that moment. They're not sober at that moment. But what defines them is what happens the next day. Do they go back on the wagon? Do they call their sponsor? Do they deal with it? And in a similar vein, the same thing here. Sheva Yipol Tzadik V'Kam, that the tzaddik may fall, and he may fall again. Righteousness does not mean perfection. That's not what it means in any stretch of the imagination, except in how Tanya describes what a tzaddik is. It's its own description from the Alter Rebbe, but in general, with the exception of Tanya, a tzaddik does not mean perfection. As a matter of fact, throughout Tanakh, we see many stories that a spiritual life is not a straight line upward. It doesn't work that way. Whether it's been David HaMelech, Moshe Rabbeinu, all the greats, Shlomo HaMelech himself. Remember, Shlomo is the one who's writing these words himself, and he himself had problems. They struggle with setbacks, they struggle with confusion. There's moments of weakness. Things happen because we are human. How is it possible, if we're not allowed to speak Lashon Hara, that the Torah is filled with Lashon Hara? Think about it. How Sarah treated Hagar, what Moshe did, his problems with his wife, and whatever other things that came up, and that Miriam spoke Lashon Hara. It's in there because Lashon Hara, he's not Lashon Hara, but we can learn from it. That's number one. We learn from, there's a toelet, there's a benefit. So the Torah has to tell us these things. Number two, it's also to show us that our avot, our imahot, our matriarchs, our patriarchs, all of our leaders were human beings with failings. Their failings are that our best day. We don't come to their worst failing. We can't even begin to compare. But they were human beings. They were not deities, God forbid. Hashem is Hashem, and only Hashem is perfect. But what distinguishes the tzaddik is how he experiences, or she experiences, failure. How do I know the tzidkaniot? It's pretty obvious. First of all, Tanakh is filled with tzidkaniot. But there's also, because it says, because of the tzidkaniot in Mitzrayim, Nigalu, Bnei Israel were redeemed. So, and there's many stories having to do with the mirrors they made, with the shofar, the tof, the drum, the timbrel that Dvorah had. It says in Az Yashir, right afterwards, it says, Vatikach Dvorah hatof. She took the tof, the timbrel, or the drum, or the cymbal, and she went around and she started dancing and singing and banging. What do you mean she took the tof? Say she took the timbrel. Because she would go around during the day and during the night, before they went out of Mitzrayim, before they're even the Makot, and she was going, you see this? I'm going to play this on the day we go out of Israel, of Egypt. This is what we're going to play. And it was something she was using to rally the troops, to give them a sense of feeling and hope. So the tzidkaniot, the tzaddikim, and when they fail, when the average person fails and falls, and when the tzaddik fails and falls, what distinguishes them is not the falling, it's not the failure, it's how they refuse to remain on the ground. It's what they do with themselves. Failure is not an obstacle to growth. It's actually a mechanism for growth. Now, I don't remember who I heard this from, but who said this? It's brilliant. Kisheva yipol tzaddik. What makes him a tzaddik is because he fell. It's not that the tzaddik fell and he keeps getting up, but because he fell, he becomes a tzaddik, because how he responds to it makes the person a tzaddik. And that doesn't have to just be the tzaddik who we're talking about in the classic sense. It could be all of us. We all have that option. We all have that opportunity to act like that tzaddik. We're not going to necessarily be like Moshe Rabbeinu, even though Rambam says that every single person has the ability to become like a Moshe Rabbeinu, not a Navi, but to be able to keep Torah and mitzvot like Moshe Rabbeinu. The sky's the limit. But practically speaking, most people don't become like Moshe Rabbeinu. But no matter where you are on that spectrum of life, of tzaddik to, God forbid, the other extreme, and none of you are, obviously, then understand that when there's failures, when you fail, when you plan to, I'm gonna get up for a minute. I'm gonna say my brachot by him. I really stop when I say Asher Yatzar, and I'm gonna really think what I'm saying, whatever it might be. And you go off the wagon and you don't do it for a little bit. Fine. Now what are you gonna do? You say, forget it. I already blew it. Now it's like a diet. A person goes on a diet. There are different ways that a person reacts when they break their diet. It's inkvar azkar. If already I did this, I might as well just go all the way. I had the one little piece of cheesecake. I might as well eat the whole thing. Or I had the one little piece of cheesecake. Okay, tomorrow I'm starting again. And it didn't make any difference. Big deal. And move along. And not be beating yourself up that you made the mistake. You're beating yourself up that you fell. You can be, okay, I feel bad, but don't live in that moment. You have to move ahead. But why seven? Why Sheva Yipol? Why does it say seven? Well, we know that the number seven is very significant in Judaism. It's usually represents completion. 7 days of the week, 7 days of creation, 7 weeks of the Omer, 7 years of Shemitah, seven, and on and on and on. So the tzaddik may fall again and again throughout the cycle of this person's life, of this entire complete entity, which is called life. But he rises again, and the benefit, it's not the right word, the hallmark of the tzaddik is persistence. Saying, you know what, I messed up. I spoke Lashon Hara. I haven't spoken Lashon Hara in 12 years, and I spoke Lashon Hara. I mean, I wish I could say that. But I fell off the wagon. Okay, tomorrow, this afternoon, not tomorrow, now. I start over again. And that also resonates, that idea resonates with the famous teaching of Nachum from Breslov, Ein Yi'ush ba'olam. There is no such thing as despair in this world. Now, yes, there is. What does he mean by that? Despair in what he means to say, there's no despair. Means a person should never look at themselves and say, let's just talk about the Torah perspective, not about diets and other things right now. I am so far gone spiritually, there's no hope for me. No hope. It's like, what do I even bother wasting my time for? Why should I spin my wheels? I'm nobody. I can't go anywhere. I'm not going to grow. You think I'm going to ever get back to where I was at that point in my life? No yeush. Because once you have yeush, once you give up hope, then the game's over. It's all over because you have just defined yourself right now by who you are. And it's exactly what Mishle Shlomo Melech is telling us in these psukim, which is that you cannot get entrenched, get yourself sucked in, but between these psukim and this pasuk we have in Parakaf Dalet, it tells you can reverse that schedule, you can reverse that program and bring yourself back to where you were and even grow upon that. A fall is never final, never. The pasuk is almost an invitation. It's inviting a person who's reading it to become more righteous. It's giving us hope. It's giving us a basis for not saying, I stink, I'm no good. By the way, again, within addictions, there are what are called core beliefs of an addict. And one of the core beliefs of an addict is, if you really knew me, you would not love me. And that feeds into this idea of Yeush, that what would a person even want from me? How can I be lovable? No one can love me who I am as this person. The tzaddik falls 7 times, but he gets up 8 times. And by getting up, that's his true measure of greatness. Let's take a look now at the next couple of psukim. I'll go back here. Is it back here or is it up there? This is what we did. Okay. The next psukim, let me just double check where I wanted to talk about here. Right. Okay. This is where I left off. This word key. Make it bold so you can see where I am. Okay, right here. Ki lo yishnu im lo yareu v'nigzala shinatam im lo yachshilu. Ki lachamu lechem resha v'yayin chamasim yishtu. Here it says here, for they cannot, referring to Rishaim now, the evil people, for they cannot sleep unless they have done evil. Unless they make someone fall, they are robbed of sleep. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of lawlessness. Okay, it's very nice, very poetic. What exactly is going on here? The Malbim explains that evil, resha, actual evil, is something existential. The people do not sin to gain something per se. They sin to feel real. They are causing damage because by causing damage, they quiet their inner chaos. This sentence alone could be probably a month worth of lectures and shiurim, both. A lecture in the sense of it's Torah related, but not only Torah, and shiurim and Torah level. We go back again to the issue of, it's not really addictions, but it's another issue of self-harm. It's called cutting, which you may or may not be familiar with, where people literally cut themselves all over their body to feel pain. Sometimes they're doing it to feel something, sometimes to feel a release. I'm not an expert on cutting. I'm unfortunately aware of it from some people I've talked to over the years. But it is by causing damage, in a sense, quiet the inner chaos. So the Russia is not necessarily gaining anything. It's something stuck in my hand here. It is not gaining something necessarily, but they need to sin. They need to do something to feel alive, to feel real. So that by causing damage, they're really quieting the inner chaos that they're going through. In Tanakh, sleep, sorry, represents harmony, shalom between the mind, consciousness, the body. Russia doesn't have harmony. Russia doesn't sleep because he's restless, because without wrongdoing, there's restlessness. Without causing someone to fail, he has insomnia. So that what is their sustenance is reversed. Bread and wine, why specifically choose those? They're symbols of stability. They're symbols of joy. And then they become corrupt and violent. The Midrash tells us that this isn't just poetic excess. What this means is that what should be valued, what should nourish, what should bring us joy, what should bring us life, now becomes poison. What they are doing with their lives, which could have been a positive, now becomes poison. How many times have you read a book, a story, seen a movie, or heard real life's true story, and say, if that, and sometimes the brilliance of a bad guy is just unbelievable. Like, how in the world do they think how to do that? And then you say, you know what? What if they had used that for something good? How much better that would be. Which, if you want to remember this for the next 2.5 weeks till the Seder, I'll tell you something which I came across a long time ago. Says, Keneged Abad Banim Divrat Torah. The Torah talks about 4 sons. Again, there are 4 typical types of individuals: the Chacham, the Rasha, the Tam, the Sheino Yodei Lishol. So the problem, and this is one thing I've stressed over the years as many times as I can, when you sit down to your Seder, you're going through the Haggadah, always look for things that are out of pattern, and you will see dozens of them. I'm saying, like, many, even from starting with Kadesh Urchatz Karpas Yachatz, there's a pattern problem. In the Keneged Abba Banim, there's a pattern. I'll tell you in a minute. In Manishtana, there's a problem with the pattern. Something's out of pattern. I'm not going to tell you what they are. Go look for them. If you want, one day we'll talk. But right now, this is an idea. It says Echad Chacham. It's a measure of intellect. The next one we'll skip for a minute. Echad Tam is a simple individual, a measure of intellect. Echad Sheino Yodei Lishol, a measure of intellect. A Rasha is not a measure of intellect. It doesn't belong. Should have said Echad Chacham, Echad Tipesh, maybe a fool. But that's not the flip side of Chacham. It's a measure. Why? What's going on? Now, with everything in the Haggadah and everything in Torah in general, but especially in the Haggadah, there could probably be 25,000 answers. I'm going to give you one short answer, and it fits in with us. The Rasha is also a measure of intellect. The Rasha is actually a very smart, cunning individual, just like the Chacham. But they use their Chokhmah, they use their wisdom for bad purposes, for evil. And therefore, now we see why it's the flip side and why it does fit in the pattern. Because it's the flip side of the Chacham. It's the Chacham, but it's the negative of the Chacham. I mean, like a positive negative, like in taking pictures, as opposed to a digital camera. And it's a measure of intellect, just like the others are as well. And there are many, many other answers. But again, I urge you to find pattern issues within. I think one day maybe I should collate all these different pattern questions and put them into one book. It won't be big, but I don't know how many I'm going to come up with, but it'd be an interesting idea. Anyways, let's take a look at a couple more psukim here. The bottom. In comparison to the darkness of the Rasha, of the sleeplessness of the Rasha, and getting sucked into all the bad things, the path of the righteous is like radiant sunlight. Holech v'or ad nachon hayom, even brightening until noon, continues to get brighter and brighter. Derech sha'im ka'afela, the way of evil people is wickedness, is darkness. Lo yadu b'meh ikashelu, they don't know what will make them stumble. If you have a good memory, you will know that the very beginning of Mesilat Yesharim, Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the author, uses this idea. It's the very last line here. It says that a person who doesn't open their eyes to what the dangers are out there, what they have to be careful about, and how to really keep Torah and mitzvot, is like a blind person walking at the edge of a precipice. That you don't know what dangers there are, you can just fall. Same thing he's telling us here. Now, this is not Shlomo quoting Ramchal. Ramchal lived in the 1700s, and Shlomo Melech lived about 2,800 years ago, something like that. Low, 2,000, yeah, 2,700, something like that. I'm not good at just guessing something like that off the top of my head. So obviously, there were different time periods by a long shot, but it's the same idea. If I don't know something is prohibited, how am I going to stay away from it? If I don't know that I'm not allowed on Shabbat to separate foods that are mixed, I do like peas. Let's say I pick the peas out of a salad. I just put them on a bowl because I don't want them. I don't know that's not okay. It's called borer, choosing or selecting. Then how am I supposed to? I don't know what's wrong. Then I'm going to do it, maybe. I am allowed to pick them out if I don't like them, to give them to somebody. Let's say my wife likes peas and I don't, so I can pick them out because I don't like them, but I pick them out and I give them to my wife. That's fine. But again, without knowledge, without basic knowledge in a lot of areas of halacha, not just Shabbat, a person can mess up. And that's also, it doesn't make the person a rasha, pastor shalom. But it means that the same idea that if you don't know something, that you could mess up. So what's happening in these psukim? Interestingly enough, it's not that the tzaddik is flooded with light. It's he's accompanied by light. You look at the words. It says, Holech va'orad nachon hayom. He's walking, and the light is with him. Nachon doesn't just mean correct, but it means it's trustworthy in a sense. All day, it's all the tzaddik is walking, and the light comes with the tzaddik. Radak tells us that the or noga is the light of dawn. That light that comes in the morning, it's soft, it's patient, it's growing. For those of us who are able to see the light of dawn, especially this time of year, it's pretty easy. But I know that a lot of people think I'm nuts about this, but I love getting up when it's dark outside and going to shul when it's dark. And like the time period of slichot and most of the winter, it's dark when I get up and I get to shul, it's still dark. It's just very good. I like that very much. I don't like the summer when I'm getting up and it's light outside. And yeah, I know I can get up earlier, but that's okay. Thanks. But the Radak says this or noga refers to the dawn light, which again is soft and patient and growing. The Torah doesn't demand instant clarity. What does it do? It sanctifies that which is gradual, that which grows. And there's a very interesting way for us to understand that. Let me just grab my Siddur just a second. You'll see what I mean. Here. Okay. In the morning, we say the following after Baruch after Baruch Hashem Kalam. It says, Hameir la'aretz, Hashem is the one who enlightens the world, who brings light to the world. Biladarim aleha, to those who dwell on it. Berachamim, he brings light with mercy. Did you ever stop to ask yourselves? I don't think I mentioned this when we did the tefillah class. Maybe I did. Just say, Hameir la'aretz v'ladarim aleha. It's a statement of fact. Hashem brings the light into the world for those people who live in this world. What does it mean, berachamim? So, years and years and years ago, I can't do it now online, but if we were in person, I would do it. Years ago, in Chicago, I gave this class also in Tefillah. And that particular day, when I was coming to this particular section, I had all the lights off in the room except for a little ambient light. And it happened to be a women's class. And they all came in, of course, like, what's wrong? Did you not pay the electric bill? Haha, very funny. Okay, so I'll explain. So we're all sitting in this room, decent sized room. Lights are off. I can barely see my notes. And I asked this very same question. What does it mean Hashem gives us the light in the morning, the rachamim? And I went over the light switches and I turned them all on at one time. And they all go, oh, like that. As I'm a pretty, okay, whatever. You don't know too much detail. When I come downstairs in the morning, I have all the lights off. I have one little light. That's it. I don't like light in the morning until I walk out the door. So Why do they all go like this? Because their eyes need to adjust. They went from dark to super bright very quickly. How does Hashem bring the light into this world? If you've ever watched dawn breaking and then sunrise, it's gradual. You see a little bit of light in the horizon, a little bit more until the point where you can't look because the sun's right in your eyes. Okay, and that's the idea that Shlomo HaMelech is giving us in this particular pasuk as well. That the tzaddik, person who's doing the right thing, to say tzaddik right now doesn't just mean someone who's a tzaddik, but someone who's doing it on the right track in life. It's about being growing gradually and sustaining it as best as possible. And Malbim is telling us the tzaddik doesn't just walk towards the light, walk towards a brighter future, but the tzaddik who's going through life generates light. What does that mean? We all have people we look up to, I hope. It could be someone in our own family. It could be someone in our neighborhood. It could be someone who we just know about or we read about. But we all hopefully look up to somebody or many somebodies that they would walk into a room and the mood shifts, something like the person's joyous. They're just a happy individual. And it makes everyone feels that almost right away. The opposite is true also. It brings the room down. But it also brings, what's the light? Light is clarity. So we talked about this in the prior psukim as well, in this chapter, that chokhmah, early in the chapter, that chokhmah enables a person to have a clearer mind and able to make decisions and not get stuck and bogged down on things. And each decision helps clarify the next decision as well. And it gives a person not just clarity, but it also gives them a retrospective of knowledge for what they've had before, be able to help plan the future and make decisions. The other side of the coin, of course, is derech rishaim ka'afela. The way of the evil is darkness. Lo yadu b'mei yikashel. They don't know what they're going to trip on. It's not ignorance of the facts, but it's the blindness of the meaning. What does it mean? Let's assume for a second, I'm not going to use any names, obviously, but I do know a couple that both grew up not religious. I mean, at all. They knew almost nothing. They today are now, for many, many years, religious, and upstanding, wonderful, whatever, members of their community. They're not here in Ma'ale Adumim. They're not even in Israel. But on their journey to becoming religious, they started to say, okay, we need to start keeping kosher. They were dating. They both decided they were going to start keeping kosher. And they dating or they're married at this point? I forgot. Oh, they must have been married. And they decided to keep kosher in their home. And when they started buying products, they knew about the OU, that the OU meant on it that it was kosher. And then they found things with the OU with the letter P. And they made the assumption that P meant parv. Not Pesach or Passover, but parv. So they started getting these things and buying them and having with the bisari stuff and with the chalavi stuff, the meat, with the milk. It turns out they didn't understand that P meant Pesach or Passover and not parv. So they were not ignorant of facts. They were just blind to a meaning of a symbol. And that's a very one little idea. The Midrash Mishle says that darkness, in a sense, is punishment. And I use that term in quotes right now, that you don't learn from your experience. When you are blind to your past, when you don't learn from your experience, how are you going to grow? Again, falls into the Sheva Yipol V'Kam. The person falls multiple times and they get up. What does it? They just get up. It means they get up and they build on what they did wrong and they try to move forward. Failure does not yield or give us wisdom if there's no way to interpret it. If a person fails, let's say they don't know how to do a specific mitzvah, or they don't know it is a mitzvah, or they don't know something's prohibited, and they keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So then someone says, you're not supposed to do that, or this is how you're supposed to. Well, unless they learn how the right way is, there's no light that's being shed on it. It's going to keep cycling through and through. The tragedy is not that the Rasha falls, that he can't even understand why he fell. That's also a massive issue. Up until this point in Sefer Mishle, there's been one recurring theme in general or a truth. That is that life is not decided by what you believe. I can have all kinds of belief. You ask me if my emunah in God is absolutely 100%. It is 100%. If I think I should be doing every mitzvah the right way, do I believe I should be doing every mitzvah the right way? Absolutely, I should. But what do I do about it? That's where we have to give ourselves a grade. The tzaddik's freedom, in a sense, comes from his values and his actions are aligned, meaning he says this is what I should be doing, and this is what he does. The habits that are formed, the rituals that are performed, happen because of wisdom, happen because of chokhmah, because of history and seeing the right way to do it, and learning, always trying to grow, always trying to improve yourself. And that clarity brings with it a fidelity to halacha, fidelity to serving Torah and Hashem. The Russia is slavery. I use that term because of the time of year we're in. Comes from compulsive movements, inner turmoil, dependence on disruption, trying to cause more trouble because they can't come to terms with who they are, a darkness. The Torah is not constraint on human freedom. Many people think, oh, I'm so the Torah is just so restrictive. It's the only thing that makes us free. It's the only thing that gives us the ability to free ourselves, is to give us a structure by which we are able to serve Hashem. And that brings us full circle. The father who taught Torah is love, i.e. Shlomo HaMelech, who's teaching us Shema B'ni and listen, my son, to take a lesson, now reveals to us in these not final psukim of the parak, but these final psukim up to here, why the love parent towards child really, really matters. The wisdom that we talked about, that we embraced, that Shlomo has gone into such depth, that we talked about early on in the Sefer and until now becomes the light that's strong enough to help a person guide him or her down a path when that road divides. Because when that road divides, that's these psukim that we just talked about. Which one am I going to take? Am I going to take this path that it's just I keep doing the wrong thing? Or am I going to understand what I should do? Maybe I fell. I'm going to get up and go back and make a U-turn and come back up that path. All these lessons that Shlomo HaMelech is giving until now come to this juncture. And this juncture is you have a choice to make. And it's not a once in a lifetime choice. For some people, it's a daily choice. For some people, it's an hourly choice. For some people, it's once in a while. Not everyone is faced with an existential crisis every day. Thank God. Not everyone is faced with this massive choice they have to make of something, but we make decisions all day long. Some of them are good decisions. Some may not be so good. But as long as you're guided by Torah and by Chokhmah, by wisdom and light, and what do you think should be done, and asking questions, you can become an unbelievable individual. And that's what Shlomo HaMelech is telling us from the beginning of Sefer Mishle up until this point. We have another 7 or 8 psukim left in the chapter, which we'll do next time. I believe, and I'll send out a message, but I think that we're going to probably not have any more classes now until right after Pesach, I think. If that changes, I'll let everybody know. But so we're either going to be on hiatus or have one more class. I'm not sure. It depends on a couple of things coming up in the family. But I will let y'all know. Bezrat Hashem. In the meantime, let me just take this off the screen share so I can see y'all and say good evening. Let's see gallery. Okay, now I can all see your face. It's good. Whoever's got a camera. Thank you for being here, and should be a good evening. Should be another quiet night, Bezrat Hashem, for everybody, wherever they may be, and just be safe, Bezrat Hashem. Everyone stay safe.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome, everybody.